late because it's third phase of moon. Welcome back, everybody, from around the world. We are live, and it is June 16th, 2017, and I have a special guest tonight, and his name is Dr. Stephen Greer. He founded the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence in 1990 to create a diplomatic and research-based initiative to contact extraterrestrial civilizations. In 1993, Greer founded the Disclosure Project, a non-profit research project which goal is to disclose to the public the government's alleged knowledge of UFOs and extraterrestrial intelligence and advanced energy and propulsion systems. The Disclosure Project was founded in an effort to grant amnesty to government whistleblowers willing to violate their secret oaths by sharing insider knowledge about UFOs. In October 1994, Greer appeared on Larry King's TV special, The UFO Cover-Up. And in 1997, along with other members of the CSETI, including the Apollo astronaut Edgar Mitchell, made a presentation at a background briefing for members of Congress. In 1998, Greer gave up his career as an emergency room physician in favor of the Disclosure Project. He has since released the documentary series detailing the work and hypothesis regarding extraterrestrial life, government cover-ups, and close encounters of the fifth kind. Now he's out with his latest project called Unacknowledged. Unacknowledged delves deep into the UFO conspiracy, the cover-up. Well, it is my pleasure to bring on Dr. Greer. He's been doing this for a long time. You've heard of him. But you're about to hear questions that have never been before asked of Stephen Greer himself. What are we going to learn tonight? Well, it is going to be an exciting ride. Everybody, hang on. This is Third Phase Moon with Dr. Stephen Greer. Welcome to the show. How you doing, Dr. Stephen Greer?
Thanks.
Good to have you on Phase of Moon.
Thank you. I'm glad I could be with you.
Wow. It's been a while. I think we spoke a few years ago. Approximately, you've been on the show 3 times, but now you're out with a new project. I know you're working really hard getting the word out on disclosure and trying to find out about the extraterrestrial existence if we're ever going to be told by our governments that they exist. There's a massive cover-up, but now we're into this new project of yours called Unacknowledged. Congratulations on that. Can you tell us what Unacknowledged is all about? What's this documentary all about, Dr. Stephen Greer?
Yeah, it's a documentary that we conceived of a little over a year ago, and we appealed to the public to support it. It was crowdfunded. 5,000 people contributed around $700,000 documentary and a companion book. By the way, the book has about 10 times more information than the movie, and it's available everywhere now, Barnes & Nobles and Amazon, wherever. And the documentary is an extension, of course, of the work we began in the late, actually it was earlier than that, late 1990s and early 2000s, and when I founded the Global Disclosure Movement in 2001 with the National Press Club event. And what this is about is providing not only people interested in the UFO subject who follow it, ardently like your listeners, but also people who are just curious about the issue and perhaps believe there's something to the fact that UFOs are being hidden, the information by aspect of the government, but they don't really understand what it is, why it's being hidden, and how they're doing this. So what we set out to do with Unacknowledged, which, by the way, I want to thank everyone who's listening who contributed to this project because it is a publicly supported crowdfunding effort. It's now, 7 weeks, it's been #1 on iTunes.
They could pull it off. They could definitely pull it off. Right now, they have the technology to mimic the form, fit, and function of extraterrestrial UFOs. They have the technology, absolutely. It's seamless, and you can never tell the difference. If they do have a false flag invasion, they're going to use one of these. This is the Hudson Valley Boomerang. This is 1982 to 1989. Over 25,000 eyewitnesses reported this craft. They can use the saucers, the cigars, the pyramids, the triangles as a united coalition And that's how they're going to do it. We're talking about 150 to 172 feet across for the wingspan, which is the identical wingspan of the B-2 stealth bomber. So the question we need to ask is, was some of that $22.4 billion used on the B-2 poured into this program? It's the exact same time frame. When they power up and when they accelerate, it looks like a spark off a grinding wheel, and you could never know the difference. So if they wanted to hoax an alien invasion, they could do it, and they could do it in a way that's 100% believable.
And it's really become a phenomenon around the world. And people say, where'd you get this name, unacknowledged? And I said, well, it's the first word in a classification of projects that are known as unacknowledged special access projects. And that stands for USAPs, USAP. And USAPs are a project that are run so secretively that if you're not in the compartment or the section working on it, you will not be told about it. It doesn't matter if you're the president or the Senate Intelligence Committee or even a general at the Pentagon. And people do not understand that these kind of projects are going on all the time. And we explain in this documentary how the secret government is working and the extent of it, what they're hiding from the public, and also, more importantly, how they're doing it, why.
Roswell was not the beginning. It was a turning point.
We just dropped 2 bombs on a country. We had a test of that bomb a few months earlier, or a few weeks earlier in New Mexico. This probably was observed by these aliens somewhere, whether they were doing reconnaissance back then or how they ever figured it out. So they came here to observe and try to figure out what the heck was that.
At the time of the crash, shortly after the detonation of the first atomic weapons, Roswell was the only nuclear-armed squadron in the world.
If you accept the multidimensional theory, it's highly likely that we've done a hell of a lot of damage. In somebody else's world, they might have even done more damage there than we did here.
The underlying theme that connects most of the Disclosure Project case files is the fact that these close encounters tend to occur near our nuclear facilities, suggesting that these visitors are deeply concerned with our hostility and the existential threat that we pose to ourselves and others once we learned to split the atom.
And most people go, oh, well, you know, if there are ETs and UFOs out there, to what end or what purpose would the government want to keep this secret? And this is something that's a central point of what we're trying to answer in the movie, of why there would be this kind of secrecy. And also the architecture of it. Most people have no idea that there is as Senator Inouye said, a secret government with its own funding mechanism, its own Navy, its own Air Force, that does pretty much as it wants to, and it's free of oversight. It is therefore unconstitutional and illegal. And this is the legal foundation, by the way, of the Disclosure Project. The Disclosure Project, and this is something I want to correct, it's not about getting the government to do anything. It's getting the people to do something. And this, I want to stand how you preface this on its head for a moment. For example, I've been involved in briefing administrations on this issue since Bill Clinton, President Clinton, starting with his first year in office with his first CI director, and up to and including handing off a briefing to the current president when he was president-elect, or just before he got elected, actually. Now, what you find with these sort of folks is that everyone is interested in the issue. You think, oh, don't people laugh? I said, no, they do not laugh. And the material that you'll see in this film, there's nothing laughing about it. But people make the mistake in thinking that, well, you're the president or you're on the Senate Intelligence Committee, and all you have to do is ask through the chain of command, and you're going to be read into or briefed on these projects. You may or you may not be. And if you are, it's because they figured out you'll go along with the secrecy. They don't think you're going to go along with the secret agenda. They're not going to tell you a damn thing. So this is what people need to understand. And the nature of a USAP, an unacknowledged special access project, as opposed to just a regular special access personnel or project or program, is that they operate invisibly and unacknowledged. And this is why even, Donald Rumsfeld has said back the day before 9/11, ironically, that there was $2.3 trillion, with a T, $trillion unaccounted for in the Department of Defense budget. I now understand it's between 8 and 9 trillion. So that's just one department. It doesn't count all the money that's being embezzled and siphoned off from other agencies. And they're going into these kind of black projects that, of course, you and I are paying for in the United States. And there are corollary projects going on in the Canada and the United Kingdom, Australia, and other countries. So this is a very big constitutional issue that we're trying to put focus on, is the nature of these illegal and unconstitutional projects, and trying to explain how these projects are actually structured. Then we go from there, after showing some of the evidence to support that, we then go to, how they've done it and kept it hidden in plain sight. And one of the central things that we present is the extent to which the media has been corrupted. Not folks like you, of course, but the mainstream media, the large media, the quote-unquote authoritative, credible media, quote-unquote, like the New York Times, all the news that fits the print. Well, not. Actually, it's all the news that the intelligence handlers will allow them to print. And we have an Air Force intelligence officer saying, oh, yeah, I was a counterintelligence, which means disinformation person, and trying to stop information coming out about this issue for 9 years. And I used to carry bags of cash to the mainstream media to get them to look at what was going on this issue, to control stories. And then we have a constitutional attorney, Daniel Sheehan, who saw documentation. Of course, he did the Pentagon Papers and the Silkwood case, the Kerr-McGee-Silkwood case, and other famous cases. And he says, yes, he saw a document that stated there were 42 operatives who were senior national security editors in the media that were on the payroll of the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA.
The corruption of the media means that you have then undermined democracy.
You and Bill O'Reilly would be hiding in a bunker together.
You are fake news.
Well, that's what we're instructed to say.
The fourth estate is dead.
So, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is actually how it works. And so when people say, how could you have, and I was just in an interview with a large newspaper in India yesterday, and they said, how is it, if this was credible, that there would be no reporting on CNN, in the Washington Post? Well, this would be the biggest story in history. I said, yes, but you're assuming that that's a free media, it isn't corrupted. We're proving that it is, and we have a CIA document that's in the film and actually printed in the book that actually describes how they have contacts at all the major media to alter stories and affect them. And this is a black and white document. It was released legally, and it flat out just states that that's what the agency does, the CIA does. So we try to take the public into an understanding of the level of corruption we're dealing here. And it's not just inside government. It's in the corporate world. It's in the media. And interestingly, it's in the academic world. One of the most stunning revelations is the extent to which, when there have been supposed scientific panels to look into UFOs, what those are dog and pony shows set up by the intelligence community. And we have CIA documents that I acquired after I briefed President Clinton's CIA director that flat out state that they had, for example, in the 50s and 60s, when they had the Robertson panel, and then in the 60s, the Condon Commission, where allegedly objective scientists were investigating UFOs, that in these sets of documents, which are different documents from different eras, it flat out states that these people are working with the CIA or on the payroll of the CIA, but they're posing in academia as objective academic scientists. And then we have the absolutely stunning testimony of Dr. Robert Woods, who, a PhD, aerospace researcher with McDonnell Douglas before it merged with Boeing. And when he was on the Condon Committee in the late 60s, which the Air Force had commissioned, the Professor Condon actually had him removed because he was bringing this positive proof and evidence to the panel. And Professor Condon actually went to the chairman of McDonnell Douglas and tried to get Dr. Woods fired. And, you know, this is in his, and of course, luckily, James McDonald liked, Mr. McDonald liked Dr. Woods enough that he did not fire him, but he was removed from the Condon Commission because he wasn't saying what they wanted to hear, which was that it was all poppycock. So this is sort of an expose of how the intelligence community and counterintelligence community works. And then, you know, the trillion-dollar question is, for what purpose? Why are they doing this? And that's kind of the last chapter in the movie and also the book, where we talk about how they're wanting to eventually set up a false flag operation to hoax an alien threat, as Werner von Braun said, to unite the world around a military effort. And they have been hoaxing things since the 50s and 60s to that end. For example, the Air Force intelligence officer, when I pressed him, admits that the government and some of the operations he has been involved with and knows about personally have staged alien abductions and hoaxed alien events to scare the hell out of people. And the purpose of that was so that people would be two things: confused between real ET phenomenon and the ones the government are in a very sophisticated way hoaxing. And number two, to create the psychological warfare underpinning to support this agenda of a false flag. And when I asked very pointedly, INW, which is the proper military term, a deceptive indication and warning, on this issue, this Air Force intelligence officer admits, yes, that is so secret I can't talk about it, but he confirms its existence. So the movie is really explosive. It's sort of, most people have to look at it 3 or 4 times to get their minds around it. The book is even more so, but it's really, really hitting a nerve. And yet at the same time, you know, you have something that's become a global phenomenon with this movie. And, you know, it's very unusual for an independent documentary to sit for 7 weeks in the #1 spot on iTunes. And yet the entire mainstream media is ignoring it, which we find very interesting and actually proves one of the points of the movie. And that's the extent to which the mainstream media is controlled and manipulated by the intelligence community.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's the main media that's the problem here. And, you know, like you said, $8 trillion, that's basically half the United States debt that we're in. And this is being used to, you're saying, to cover up the existence of alien technology and suppress it, and doing these black operations to do some kind of false flag alien invasion. Let's get to that a little bit later. That's incredible and scary.
By the way, the false flag, someone asked me, flag going to happen. I said it started happening in the 50s. We have a document from 1953 where the director of the CIA, Mr. Smith, stated that this whole issue has great value for psychological warfare operations. Well, what the hell is he talking about? Psychological warfare. You use psychological warfare when you're doing something to deceive and disinform the public. Well, this is what he was talking about. So that's when they started the entire effort, and this is why I tell people, I said by 1954, covert programs had mastered gravity control and had anti-gravity flying saucers that looked alien that are not. They're made by our aerospace industry. And they had people, initially, they had people who had various deformities or were of small stature or what have you, and that they would put on different kinds of costumes and masks, but that were very persuasive. And those would go around doing these abductions and home invasions. And this is admitted to, by the way, by the intelligence officer. Then they progressed later to more robotic systems that are sophisticated biological nanotechnology systems, which we can get into if we have time. the whole disinformation nexus around this issue, which 90% of everything out there on this issue is false information designed that at some point we need to come together and do sort of a Independence Day, the movie event, and unite as a planet to fight a planetary system. And this is why the charlatans in this field, the warmongers, the fear mongers always have the biggest doors open to them. And if you actually start exposing this dirty little secret, every door slams in your face, which is, of course, what we've had happen for 20 years. But at the same time, with the internet and these digital platforms for getting a crowd-funded film out like this that was not dependent on a big studio, or for that matter, a very large budget, we're able to get this information out to millions and millions of people. And, something's going to be happening later in August where upwards of 100 million people are going to find out about this. So we're very excited about it. And this is how disclosure goes forward.
The internet was designed by the CIA, apparently, and it's incredible that we're able nowadays to get all this information out to the public around the world, basically for free at points, and people are listening, but it's still going through the CIA technology. Is there still some kind of why are they allowing this information out if it's so detrimental to what they don't want you to know via the major media?
Well, I mean, it's sort of a balance of powers situation where, for every bit of information that comes out, like the film Unacknowledged in that book, there'll be 10 things that'll come out that are chock full of disinformation. So the internet doesn't filter. So if you have 90% rubbish and 10% truth, and people don't actually know how to discern one from the other, their war games still can go forward. So that's the battle that we're fighting. And frankly, we know that. And by the way, it was DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Administration, that developed the internet. And of course, it's been reported even in the mainstream media that the National Security Agency have fiber optic bundles running straight into the Google facilities and other internet facilities. So, and everyone who operates a PC, newsflash, there's a Microsoft, some code and some cookies in there that, which is actually why Bill Gates became so wealthy, that were approved by the National Security Agency. So basically, they have full access to everyone's computer. And this is well known in the intelligence community, and frankly, they can watch everything going on. The question is, to what extent we can get some elucidation to shine some light on this subject amidst all the confusion and all the darkness and disinformation. And personally, as one man, I can do what I can do, but that can then be amplified by millions of people who begin to realize what is actually going on and begin to take some kind of action. But that's really why it's a very grassroots effort. And I think that's why, the whole disclosure movement, you may not know this, that I founded, and there are many different spin-off disclosure efforts that have occurred since 2001. But, as the father of the global disclosure effort, what I have found is that the reason we had to go forward with doing this in a public interest fashion instead of through the government is that the people in government who are friendly to this idea don't have control and access over the project. Now, let me repeat that. If you're a president or if you're a general or an admiral and you're friendly to the idea of disclosure, you are not going to be given access and control over those projects. That's the nature of these illegal government programs. If you are someone who will be convinced to go along with the agenda, they will pull you in and give you a golden parachute, however many hundreds of millions or billions of dollars you want. So that's how the system works. It's not that elegant. It's not hard to understand. It's all about corruption. And if you understand basically how the mafia has worked and multiply that a millionfold, then you begin to get an understanding of how these covert operations are functioning. It's the largest racketeering-influenced corrupt organization on Earth.
Or basically 8 trillion fold. That's a lot of money. Let me tell you, that could make anybody corrupt. And let me ask you, there's a lot of disinformation out, no doubt, and a lot of people say a lot of disinformation about us right here at Third Phase of Moon, and I see things about you as well, Dr. Greer. Some people say you're a disinformant. What do you have to say to people about that you might work for the CIA?
Oh, well, it's complete utter rubbish. I mean, we wouldn't have to be crowdfunding this and operating for 20-some years without an office or a staff or all volunteer if we were getting this kind of money from the intelligence community. I will say that in May of 1992, 25 years ago, I was offered by a member of the so-called Majority Intelligence Committee, MAGIC, who was a former director of Army Intelligence. I was offered $2 billion if I would do what you're talking about, and I refused it. He then went to my wife and tried to convince her, and she was sort of shocked and came to me, and I said, no, we absolutely will never do such a thing. So the proof of the pudding is I've turned down those sort of offers. We have almost impoverished ourselves doing this. I mean, you're talking to an emergency and trauma physician here, not someone who's couch surfing at some sort of whatever around, I'm not going to name names, who gave up $500,000-$600,000 a year as an emergency physician to be doing this without income and without a staff and with volunteers. So the idea that somehow we're doing this for some other reason and some nefarious efforts are, behind what we're doing is just that complete nonsense. But people can say anything. I mean, people can say that the moon is made out of Swiss cheese. It doesn't make it true, but all I can say is, you as it says, and I think it's in the Bible, you'll know them by their deeds. So you just know it by what people have actually achieved and are doing. So we'll stand on that record.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of rumors going around the internet, but that's what it's all about, and it kind of gets crazy. But
it's trolls. I mean, look. First, let me stop you right there.
Go.
6 to 8% of everyone on the internet are sociopaths. Let me repeat that. This is in well-founded studies. So, and those are the ones that are noisy, and those are the ones that get all the attention. Now, in the conspiracy and UFO field, it's probably double that. Percent or more of the people are sociopaths. And those people can go around and say all kinds of things and make up all kinds of nonsense. And, I just tend to just keep moving forward no matter what they say. And the key thing is that that's what we should all do. Because, if you spend all your time trying to address every nut job who just makes up a story about you and you're a public figure, you would get nothing else done. So, it's non-productive, and, a wise person just doesn't even bother it, except, if you ask me, I'll tell you what I think about it.
Yeah, if you listen to all the naysayers out there and the critics, there wouldn't be any information getting out. We got to stick to what's important and not about what these trolls got to say. So over the years, over the past few decades, you've let whistleblowers come forward on a public forum and share, things that could really get them in trouble in regards to UFO phenomenon, alien phenomenon. And these guys are major players, like some majors, airline pilots, law enforcement. And then, which is interesting, is that Snowden is one of the biggest whistleblowers out there now. Do you think he is aware of this false flag invasion? And is he going to maybe leak that out, so maybe the main media will pick up on that? It seems like the main media picks up on what Snowden says, which is interesting, but they refuse to pick up on others.
I seriously doubt he had access to unacknowledged special access projects. And I want to put this in perspective. What Snowden revealed were things that, frankly, everyone already knew about. If you were at all educated, which I know nobody reads anymore, in the early 2000s, it was reported about Echelon and Carnivore from the National Security Agency, how they were penetrating everyone's internet and this and that. And that was well known. It was actually reported in the mainstream media. What he revealed were, PRISM and some other operations which the president and the intelligence oversight committees knew about. So those were not illegal projects. However, Big Brother and scary they are, and I think unconstitutional, but frankly, they were being overseen. So those were not unacknowledged projects. Those were special access projects. They were top secret, SCI, TSSCI, top secret special compartmented information or intelligence, but they were not unacknowledged. And I don't think that he had access to USAPs through what he was doing as a young man at the Booz Allen Hamilton, who is the contractor for the National Security Agency for whom he worked. Now, possible if he had stumbled across any of this information, I can't say he didn't, but there's no evidence that he did. And people need to understand the nature of TSSCI, top secret special compartmented information, and the nature of an unacknowledged special access project, which would be the most secret thing within those top secret categories that don't get acknowledged to anyone who's not in the system. So unless he was able to penetrate the USAP, now, here's where he could have saved himself a lot of problems. And anyone out there listening, listen very carefully. Don't touch something that's being overseen properly by the government, the president, and the Congress. Go into these USAPs that are dealing with the ET issue and free energy and anti-gravity and all of this, because those are not being overseen properly by the chain of command. They are illegal. And if you expose an illegal project, only when you expose something that's being overseen legally. And this is a very important point I'm making here. So the mistake that Mr. Snowden made was to expose projects that, even though they were terrifying and Big Brother in 1984-like, they were legal. Now, if he had stuck to trying to get to the bottom of these unacknowledged special access projects, they couldn't have touched him because he would have been exposing operations that were criminal and unconstitutional.
Yeah, I've heard of this. There was some testimony in front of the Congress, and I think Daniel Inouye wanted to shut the testimony down because he said it was getting into national security. So therefore, you really can't prosecute or do anything if it's going to be in the public and it's going to be hushed about this sensitive information getting out, whereas this unacknowledged information is a lot more, corrupt, and it would expose basically the insiders to what's going on and why this massive corruption is going on, it seems to me. So, yeah, it's very complicated, but I do get your sense of
a huge part of it. The other part of the secrecy that we go into the movie Unacknowledged, and even more so in the book, is the fact that there have been technologies that have been developed since the 40s and 50s that involve a so-called zero-point energy and anti-gravity that would completely take us off of oil, gas, coal, nuclear power, etc., and also would take us off solar panels and wind. And we would have free energy, quote unquote. You would have something the size of your heat pump or smaller that would be running your house or your business, or for that matter, your city, with zero pollution, zero energy costs. Now, that's one of the big reasons for the secrecy, is that involves hundreds of trillions of dollars in commodities, oil and gas and uranium and coal and what have you, not to mention the infrastructure that supports it. So the entire planet is choking to death on this filth unnecessarily. And so we call this in the movie the lost century, that there's basically a century of lost evolution and development on Earth because of this illegal secrecy. And I want to, connect the point here. One of the things we do in this movie, that we're not, interviewing just the man on the street in here. We're relying on people like the first director of the CIA, whose letter we have in the movie and in the book, where he wrote to Congress, and it was published actually in the New York Times back in that era in 1960-61. And Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter had been the first director of the CIA. The CIA was formed after Roswell happened in 1947. And he states in 1961 in this letter that the secrecy around the UFO issue is a threat to the national security. He does not say that the UFOs are a threat to the national security. He states that the secrecy and these labyrinthine and Byzantine programs that are running illegally are a threat to our national security. And Eisenhower, by the way, said the same thing when he said, beware the military-industrial complex, because extreme secrecy like that become a threat to our democracy, our way of life, and our security. So we were warned in the late 50s and 60s by these sorts of folks. No one was listening. And here we are in 2017 living through the consequences of a biosphere being destroyed, half the world's population living in unbelievable poverty, and we're in one radicalized war after another that's unnecessary. And who's benefiting from this? Well, it's the same characters, but it's just a later generation who are benefiting from it in the 50s. And those are the people who control the central macroeconomic, the economic and industrial and banking and financial systems, who want everyone to basically be slaves on their plantation. They don't want to say they're running a plantation, but it's a plantation. And so keeping all these technologies secret became paramount, and they used national security as an excuse, and that worked for a few years, and then people started defecting from that party line, but it's held till now. So what I think more people have to do who are inside these projects are to defect and to come forward as whistleblowers, and we need the public to spread the word that that's what we're looking for. And the film Unacknowledged and the book make that appeal very clear at the end of the movie, at the end of the book.
So basically, there was a major threat to the major players in power from this UFO phenomenon. They're like, wow, look at all this energy, look at this free energy, anti-gravity, and et cetera. And they're like, we're going to have to suppress this. So now instead of the public being threatened by the UFOs, we got to be threatened by this massive cover-up and this major corrupt system that is basically almost dangerous. You're saying that they're going to be creating a false flag invasion. So are they building like these flying saucers or like things that look like alien craft somewhere? And you said that they're genetically engineering humans to look like aliens. Where are they?
Not humans to look like aliens. They're just taking different kinds of ETs, using their genetic material from ones that they've that have crashed, that they've downed with advanced electromagnetic weaponry, and then taking those and turning them into programmed life forms. And those are actually controlled by humans. They're on aircraft that are man-made, but they look like a UFO, and they're anti-gravity. And those have been used for many years, as you will see in the movie. It is acknowledged finally by an Air Force intelligence officer that, in fact, such staged alien events have been going on for a very long time, and he admits they're probably still going on, and that's very top secret, and he flat out says that. And now the transcript is more extensive in the book, but if you go to iTunes, there's actually you can get a version of this movie with the full interview of the Air Force intelligence officer, as well as my full interview that were the backbone of this movie, as a special feature. It's only available on iTunes because other platforms don't provide those special feature content. They don't allow it. And it's also in a number of languages, I think 7 or 8, 9 languages. But I think one of the things that people need to understand is this has been a long-term project. This was hatched in the 50s. And that's why we put up there that the famous 1950s General Douglas MacArthur, who famously said that World War III would be interplanetary. And people, were going, what the heck is he talking about? And then, of course, Werner von Braun told his assistant that's in the movie, Carol Rosin, that in the 70s, when he was on his deathbed, he said basically the plan was to have the Cold War and then nations of concern, global terrorism, and then a threat from outer space and a host alien attack. And so it would be very easy, by the way, for them to press a button, and suddenly there would be things that look to everyone who's not educated on this issue like a UFO, and it could take some sort of action that would be violent or frightening and stampede the whole public into sort of a 9/11 frenzy of, oh my God, we're being invaded by aliens, and it's all being run out of an underground base in Australia or Dugway in Utah or some other underground facility. So this sounds like a science fiction movie, but it's actually what they're planning to do, and that's why, frankly, it was one of the central reasons for making this film, is to sort of send out a warning for people not to be fooled by this kind of nonsense.
What about the elephant in the room? Our maverick president, do you think that he might do something that might be different from most of our presidents in regards to maybe giving us some information? It sounds like NASA's on the verge of telling us that, hey, look, we know that there's life out there. Finally, it's almost ridiculous that they haven't already acknowledged that, basically. Right. And it's ludicrous to say we're the only life in the universe we could go on and on for that. But do you think President Trump might be different from all of our other presidents? He seems like he makes his own mind up at points.
Well, I can't predict. Look, we were very hopeful 24 years ago when we briefed President Clinton and his administration and the CIA director that at the end of the Cold War he would do something about this. He was never given control or access to these projects, which he has admitted to people privately that I know personally. Then you had, of course, George W. Bush, this at all, but his vice president, Dick Cheney, is on the committee keeping it secret. So, and as was George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush's father. Then you fast forward and you have 8 years of Obama. As you know, John Podesta in 2002 came out in favor of disclosure after the 2001 National Press Club event that I put on here in Washington, where I am right now, by the way. And interestingly, he was only chief of staff for Bill Clinton. He later became the man who put together the cabinet and the administration for President Obama. And we, had delivered to him a briefing for Obama as soon as we could in 2009 after the president took office. And then he was the chairman for Hillary Clinton's campaign. Of course, she lost. But, he was fully apprised of these issues, although he only goes so far in his public statements. However, now we have, of course, President Trump. After he got nominated and there was a chance that he would win, we had a member of his team, someone who'd been a delegate for him, hand deliver an extensive briefing to him. And whether or not he will take action on the points that are made in it, I cannot predict. What I can say is there's certainly interest at various levels. And always the question is, when a president or another senior official in an administration, or even some of the generals and admirals I've met with, inquire about this, most of the time, not always, but most of the time they are told no such project exists, or they'll be just flat out told, I'm not going to tell you anything about it. For example, Daniel Sheehan, who was requested by people in the Carter administration to look into this for the White House when President Carter was president, found out that the outgoing CIA director, George H.W. Bush Sr., was asked by President Carter about this issue, and Bush flat out refused to provide him information. This is in the movie. And so what Carter did was to try to set up a White House study through SRI, Stanford Research International, but that was shut down, and he had his legs cut off at the knees, and eventually President Carter was just threatened. So now this gets into the question of, what powers are vested in the president. Well, constitutionally, They're extensive. But we're talking about unconstitutional, illegal projects. And people need to not make assumptions that just because you're the president, you can wave a magic wand and get your way. And so the only question I have is how much courage is in any given political leader, whether here or abroad, and to what extent will they be tenacious and persevere. So far, and I've been, sort of had a front row seat to this since 1993, which is now 24 years, my assessment is that the political and moneyed class don't want to step on the toes of the 8,000-pound King Kong gorilla that's out there. Because when the push comes to shove, that is running the secrecy on this issue has much more power than the U.S. government has or the president has. And at a certain point, it's plain power politics. It's point, set, match. Let me give you a great example. I took Edgar Mitchell when Edgar Mitchell was investigating this in the early days. This was 20 years ago in the spring of 1997, to a briefing with the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And this is J2, is what they call that. And there's an admiral, Admiral Tom Wilson. And I was doing a formal stand-up briefing for him in the Pentagon in his offices. And I had found out that prior to our coming, I had sent him a briefing so he'd have some materials before I got there. And in that was a document that's in the movie and in the book. That's a National Reconnaissance Office document, the super secret spy satellite operation, NRO. And that document lists a lot of the project code names and numbers as of the early 90s. So he recognized one of them, this admiral did, contacted one of these operations and was told point blank, even though they recognized he was the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that he didn't have a need to know and they would not tell him anything. And that's what happened to him. So by the time I got to this meeting, the man was really agitated and he was frightened and he knew this was serious. And at the end of the meeting, when I asked him for his help, he said, "What am I to do? I can't do something unless I'm ordered to by my civilian authorities, and you've told me that they've already been shut down, and the projects that are running, these unacknowledged projects, have things that can go circles around the best thing I have, which is a B-2 stealth bomber." And he says, they have things that will make circles around it. And I said, yes, sir, they do. He says, then what am I to do? Now, this is an admiral at the Pentagon in power who is the head of intelligence joint staff. Everyone should replay what I just told you and think about the implications of that. Because that happened, and I have witnesses to that happened. So but this is how serious the crisis is in national security and constitution, and how dangerous. And this is exactly for a CIA director when he said point blank that the secrecy around the UFO issue is a threat to the national security. And most people are worried that the UFOs are a threat. Well, they're not a threat. Look, if you have interstellar travel capabilities and you wanted to fix this crazy planet, they could hit a button and it would all be over in a nanosecond. Trust me. I believe absolutely the technology exists. That's not their intention. The real problem is a human problem. The secrecy, the corruption, the lying, the assassination, the bribery, the defamation of character. As soon as I entered the scene and didn't take this $2 billion payoff, I started from that point on, 25 years ago to now, there's been a non-stop defamation of my character and assassination of my character with the most outrageous and stupid lies. But the fact of the matter is you expect that. I knew that was going to happen. And I turned to my wife. I said, within a month, watch out. And it was within a month, they started making up all kinds of stuff. So I think this is, unfortunately, I'm stubborn and I don't give up. And I find that very often in politicians and in lawyers and in people who are very wealthy. So this is why I feel like, we're better off leading this as we the people, those of us who are just ordinary citizens. And that's why, this is why it's a call to action for all of us to do this. And you look at, you look at your show. You got if you have 500,000 people or 1 million people eventually hear and see this interview, what if each one of those people went and actually got the book? Boom, it'd be on the New York Times bestseller list. Got the movie, boom, it would stay up on number one on all platforms. I mean, it wouldn't be a big investment compared to the $12 million I've lost from my medical career doing this. And then, boom, if they actually went to our website, SiriusDisclosure.com, SIRIUS Disclosure.com, and contributed to the energy lab that we want to get going. Well, with the people who are listening to your show, if they would actually take action and support disclosure and free energy research, it'd be done. But the problem is everyone is saying, well, we're going to wait and see if the government does it. Big mistake. Or we're going to wait and see if everyone else wants to see if someone else will do it. And I think that's the biggest mistake that the UFO community and the disclosure movement has made, is thinking that this is going to be by somebody else. It's going to be done by you and by me and all of us together. And as soon as people take responsibility for that, you're going to see real change happen. And if they don't, all I can say is we're going to end up where we're headed.
Yeah, it's basically up to us. And recently, there was a lot of people that raised their eyebrows. It was an interview on 60 Minutes where Laura Logan interviews Robert Bigelow from Bigelow Aerospace. And there's
right.
There's a lot of stuff that people, I want to get your opinion of what you thought of that interview. He basically let everybody know that, yeah, the aliens are here. And do you think he's part of this unacknowledged project? What's up with
sure.
him?
Yeah.
What about?
Yeah, sure.
Isn't it interesting too that any pilot, a major airline pilot, if they come across any kind of unidentified flying object while they're on the job, they can't report it to the FAA. They got to go to Bigelow himself. Does this make sense?
No, it doesn't make sense. But I don't like talking about personalities, but I'll tell you, I've known the gentleman since he and I first met at the Rockefeller Ranch in 1993, and I've been at his offices in Las Vegas back in the 90s. And he has his own interest in the subject. Let's put it that way. And he works with a lot of people who have a long-standing connection to the Majority Intelligence Committee on this issue, and has also been very involved in the whole mutilation, abduction. It's interesting that 60 Minutes would choose to interview him and ask him this question at the time that Unacknowledged, which is exposing the Unacknowledged project, is number one on iTunes and is going viral all over the world. So it was very, very strange, frankly. But yes, of course, and he has an interest, and he has people who are in his team that are well-known operatives within the intelligence community. What I would say is that people have to eventually sort this out themselves, and I prefer not to get into discussion of personalities so much as ideas. But if somebody has a track record of taking information and burying it, and or providing a huge amount of funding that end up putting out what is the heart of the disinformation that is designed to prepare people to be afraid of ETs, to prepare people for World War III, you better start asking what is this agenda about? Who is their master? What agenda are they serving? Because let's think about this for a moment. If we were to have world peace and bring out free energy, the entire multi-trillion-dollar military-industrial and multi-hundred-trillion-dollar fossil fuel system and power grid would be obsolete very quickly. And we could transform this planet into an amazing high-tech society without pollution and poverty in a generation. Literally in one generation, there would be no poverty on Earth, no pollution. The Earth would be pristine again. But the people who are the stakeholders in the conventional paradigm, those people don't really want that to happen, and they will set up any kind of diversion to be sure it doesn't happen, and including this false flag effort. So I think that's what you really want to look at. And that, as a rule of thumb, if you look at that, you'll pretty much know where someone's coming from. Do they belong to the path of endless conflict, endless war, and conventional technologies that are centralized and enrich the uber elite of the world? Or are they an advocate of peace and an entirely new planet that's rehabilitated and where there's prosperity and abundance for everyone on the planet? But see, in that scenario, there is the centralized power goes away, because suddenly every village and every home and everyone is empowered, instead of it being dependent on this centralized system. So it's interesting power system we have, both political power but also physical energy generation, is oriented towards not only very destructive technologies like nuclear and fossil fuels, but also aggregates power into this center of gravity that's so corrupt. If you bring out the information we're talking about and the technologies that go with it, that paradigm shifts completely, and power then goes back to the people, and prosperity, and every single village becomes self-sufficient. You're not dependent on a line of super tankers of oil or transmission grid from a public utility or what have you. This is really a transformation and revolution that is going to happen at some point. But the people who have a vested interest in the current status quo, they don't want to see that happen. But the humanity needs to see it happen, and the Earth needs to see it happen. So that, you can pretty well judge if somebody is on the side of on the right side of it, that they're putting out disinformation that leads to fear and war and the centralized military and industrial hegemony, or if they're somebody who's advocating for this transformation, which has been forestalled for decades, but which we could have. And I always love the story when Colonel Corso had an encounter with an ET at White Sands, and he brusquely said to the ET, "What's in it for me?" And the ET said, "A new world, if you can take it." And that was 1956. I was 1 year old. I turned 62 in about 10 days. And what I tell people is that I started this project when I was in my mid-30s as a young medical doctor, and now I have grandchildren the age of that my children were when I spent a very long ultra marathon. But I think the reason I stay in it is because I know that the outcome has to be this very beautiful outcome for a new future. Now, the only question is how much craziness and damage we might do to the Earth and to each other before we get there. But it needs to happen, and it will happen eventually. And that's all that any of us can hope for and work for.
Sure. Well, it seems to me that it's basically black and white. You have the major media, and then you have the internet. Because with the phenomenon of unacknowledged on how well it's doing and how many people are, being gravitated towards this, I've seen celebrities, I've seen people selling books or products that have not even garnished as much recognition as your movie Unacknowledged, and they go over all the media, every single circuit from the late shows to every single news network, and you're sharing this, and you have not been privy access to these major media conglomerates. To me, that's
for the most part we're blacklisted from them.
It's proof that you're being blacklisted and being shut down, and it's not getting out. And it's in black and white. It's undeniable. We only have a few minutes left, and there's so much stuff that I want to go over with you. So we're going to have to get you back on the show. But let's back up a little. Let's back up, and quickly, I want to hear. It sounds like you've had your first UFO sighting when you're approximately 8 years old. We love hearing UFO sighting reports right here at Third Phase Moon. Could you share with us what that experience was like? What did you see?
Oh, well, I was in a little boy in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was out with my twin sister and some boys, and there was this beautiful seamless silver object. It was sort of a disc that appeared in the sky. It was crystal clear, and in the middle of the day, and it appeared and then disappeared. Didn't just fly in and out like you would see an airplane. And I knew I had seen a real UFO, and of course my parents, they just thought we were nuts. But I knew what I had seen, and so that it was so clear and it was so unmistakable, and all of us saw it. That I thought, well, you know what? This is real, and I became absorbed in the idea that we weren't alone in the universe. And as a little boy, I used to gather, back in those days, old Argosy and Time Life and different magazines that would have UFO stories and pictures in it. And the back of my closet had a 2 or 3 foot stack of books and magazines that I had collected when I was 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. I wish I still had that collection. It was sort of iconic. But it ignited a lifelong interest in this. And, I knew what I had seen. And, I was a young boy, but I wasn't stupid. And I knew that it was absolutely extraordinary. And it was fairly close and clear and silent and seamless. By the way, one way you can tell the man-made ones, you can see rivets and parts and sections to it. The ones that are interstellar, they don't have that. They don't have any parts.
Wow, that's interesting. I got a feeling if it wasn't for that writing of yours as a young child, that we wouldn't even be talking, or none of this what you've accomplished so far in this disclosure project basically would have never come to fruition without this sighting. Quite amazing. Dr. Greer, thanks for joining us right here at Third Phase Moon. We want to get you back on. Is there any last words you want to give to the people listening right now? What should they do? What should they do to get ready for what we've been talking about?
Well, I think there are a lot of things. First of all, they can share the information that we have in documentary and book with everyone they know. It's really written, the book and the movie is made for people who are new or may not know anything about the subject, and it takes them from 0 to 100 miles an hour very quickly. So it's all about networking, because we don't have $100 million advertising budget like a Hollywood film, and we obviously, as you pointed out, the major media is blacklisting it. The other thing people can do is to contribute to the effort at our website at SiriusDisclosure.com. It's SIRIUS disclosure.com. And then, you can just get involved. You can form your own contact team. We have an app for that. And we have people, and you can also network in your community to find other whistleblowers. You'd be surprised if you start showing this film to people or the book, and you'll find that there's people all around who've been in these classified projects who will begin to tell you their accounts. The other thing is that I'm going to be in Toronto the weekend of the 23rd, 24th, 25th at the ACE conference, and we'll be doing a Canadian premiere of the film, and I'll be doing a Q&A after. And also, I'll be doing a workshop on Sunday for 4 hours. So if you're in Canada and want to come to that, I hope to see you there. And if you can't, we're going to webinar it online, and the information about that is on our website, SiriusDisclosure.com. So for people who can't come to Toronto, we can meet up there.
Well, Dr. Greer, it's been my pleasure, and it's been quite insightful. I've heard things that I haven't heard before, so this is what we like right here at Third Phase Moon. You be safe, you keep in touch, and we look forward to speaking with you again in the near future, Dr. Greer. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Wow, everybody, that was Dr. Greer. Stay tuned for more updates right here on Third Phase Moon, and I wanted to thank Jim Martin from the Orchard Entertainment, Jim Martin, thanks for setting this up, because if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have had Dr. Greer on our show tonight. So quite incredible. Everybody, keep your eyes on the skies, and if you see something incredible, get that camera and have a steady hand and proceed to film whatever you see and submit it to us right here at Third Phase Moon. Be safe, everybody. Blake Cousins, Third Phase of Moon.